So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about top 9 challenges while buying a multi-million dollar business. So if you have been thinking about getting into this business, getting involved, it's much better to know about the challenges that you would be facing up front. So I'm going to be covering 9 of these that I have identified in my experience. And I have spoken to and met over 300 healthcare business owners. I've negotiated with several of the companies, including a $3.5 million revenue company, a $10 million, $25 million, even a $120 million company I have negotiated with. So I'm going to be revealing what are the top 9 challenges in that whole process. And even before you start buying these companies, there are steps involved that you have to do before that. And it all comes together at the end. So I'm going to be talking about these 9 challenges. Number 1 is going to be fear. So when I left Dan Peña's Castle seminar, I had the steps in my mind very clear, but what comes in the way is fear. I haven't really done it before. Will this work? Will this not work? Am I investing time in something that doesn't work? You really don't know whether something is going to work for you or not. Even if that thing works for someone else, you don't really know whether it'll work for you or not until you execute. So there's always this doubt and fear element that will the board member say yes to me? Will the seller would want to talk to me? Will the board member want to take meetings with me? Will they listen to me? I mean, there are these questions that would come, and they're very natural. No matter how confident you are, how much self-esteem you have, you're not going to be as confident when you're doing something for the first time. So, fear is very natural. We fear the unknown. And if you haven't done anything like this, if you don't know somebody who has already done it, then fear is going to be a very dominant factor. In fact, the people that I trained in my mentorship, they did not have as much fear as I did, because they were always in touch with me and I was able to guide them. This is what's going to happen. This is what you can expect. This is what the person in front of you might be thinking. This is where they are coming from. This is where you need to come from. And that added perspective of somebody who has already been through that tunnel can eliminate fear. So fear is the first thing that you would experience when you want to do a cold call, when you have your first presentation of the deal with the bank. I remember I got into a meeting with a very high profile banker. He had financed a $300 million transaction and his name was in the news, in the local news in UAE. And he was on the call with 3 or 4 other guys. And it was one of my first few presentations where I will be proposing my project. And it's always before the call you feel extreme fear, but when you're in the call, you're kind of in the field, you're in the game. So you don't feel as much fear when you're in the call, you're just dealing with human beings. But before the call, there is this anticipated set of events that is going on in your head. So fear could completely paralyze you, and it's a big portion of the challenge actually. The second challenge that you would face is multiple decision makers. So when you go to acquire a company, you would see that there are 2 shareholders, 3 shareholders, 4 shareholders, and if they have a very good understanding and chemistry with each other, they would be fairly easier to deal with because they are kind of on the same page. But if they have some kind of a conflict, which can happen in business, business partners can get into a conflict and they're not in talking terms with each other, then both of them can have different views and different needs and different interests. They can get out of a deal. And when I say a deal, I mean a business that they own and they want to sell that business to you. And in that process of sale, 2 people can want completely different things. One person may want to stay on, another person may want to leave, and that can create a little bit of conflict, and you will have to manage multiple interests, you have to account for two people's needs and desires in the deal. Because just getting an agreement from one person is not enough. You need multiple approvals. Same thing happens with a bank. There would be, couple of people have to sign on the loan. It depends on the threshold, but there are loans where a couple of people have to say yes to. So as long as, till the time you're dealing with the board members and building your dream team, you're dealing with one decision maker. Everybody represents themselves. But the moment you start talking to a company, it gets a little bit complex. So second challenge is going to be multiple decision maker. Third is my favorite. The third is lying. Things in business would be extremely easy and extremely straightforward. Even dating, again, things in business would be extremely simple if people were straightforward and they just spoke what they thought about, they spoke what they really felt, they were honest, and they told you to your face what the deal is. Do they want to sell? Do they not want to sell? If it's a banker, do they want to finance the deal, not want to finance a deal? It's kind of like dating, in dating, everybody's playing games with each other and not revealing their feelings, not revealing how much you like the girl, or the girl is not revealing how much she likes you. And there's so much confusion because people are lying, And I was going into the business arena, I was naive enough to think that if I am honest and if I show my cards, the other person will show his cards also. But that's rarely the case. A lot of the people will pretend to show their cards that really, Prithvi, I'm just being honest, this is what the deal is. But, they're not telling you a lot of the stuff. They're not showing you a lot of the stuff. So you're essentially operating on false information or half information or misinformation. So you go to acquire a company and the person tells you, this is my revenue. And then you get the statement and maybe there is a difference. And then you investigate and there is further differences. And then you investigate more and the picture completely looks different. I made a contact with a seller. This was a $3.5 million clinic, cosmetic clinic. And we were just having a conversation and he said that he wants to sell the company. And there was this expansion that he was doing of the clinic and he did not disclose that. He just hid it. He just hid that portion. He even mentioned it. I'm doing this expansion, but we'll talk about this, but this is not important. Tell me what my clinic is worth. And he just brushed it aside. And later on, I realized he just wanted me to value the clinic first. And then he would introduce the expansion and then say, now tell me what's the value. So he was just saving this second piece. And we spent months and months on this deal because, he seemed like an interested person, but he tried to hide an aspect of his business. Another thing he hid was that he had a personal loan of about 12 or 13 million dirhams with a bank. And we found out about that much later from a bank when we went to get financing. So the point is, there are so many things that people are hiding from you. About their needs, about their business. I mean, imagine yourself in the shoes of the seller who wants to sell his business. I mean, if you reveal a nasty information and the price goes down, I mean, would you really want to reveal it? So they are in that position where every business has some kind of nastiness going on. And you would be surprised. I was told about this by my mentor, Dan Pena, and he said there is ugliness in almost every business. And I did not understand what he meant. And I realized when I met another cosmetic clinic, and what they used to do, I'm not going to tell you the name, but what they used to do, it was a couple, actually, very cute couple, who said that they use very cheap Botox. They find a way to source Botox that's very cheaply available in the market, that's not the best quality. And they had these little, almost like illegal hacks that got them to compromise on their services, but they were making money and their cost was really low. So, not all businesses are 100% legitimate. Even the legitimate businesses have some aspect of the business that's not legal, right? Another incident that one of my board members shared was that there was a lab and a pharmacy attached, and he said he found out about this in his career, that he started to do due diligence on this lab and pharmacy, and he found out that they weren't actually testing the patients. They were just making up the reports, and then they were misdiagnosing the people and then supplying medicines. So that's like clear malpractice right there. So you may go to buy a company and you may see revenue, but the how they produce the revenue was illegal, and it's not wise for you to enter into this deal. So, and the strangest part is that sometimes they would tell you, and then you're like, holy shit, they're telling me about this stuff. Think about the stuff they haven't told you, right? So there are these things happening. Another classic one is that it's a clinic. It's not allowed to do surgeries because you need a different facility to do surgeries in healthcare. And they would be doing minor surgeries, because the doctor is a surgeon. He knows how to do surgery, but he can't do it in that facility. You need, fully sanitized, you need camera, you need this, that. There are requirements by the authorities to have a certain facility, and you got to get approved. You got to get approval from authority of that facility, and then you get a license to do surgery, and then you can do the surgery. You can't do it in a clinic that's just designed to diagnose and do minor procedures. You can't perform a surgery there. But there are some surgeons who would occasionally do that, or some of them even will perform a surgery at a patient's home, which is again a clear malpractice. So there are things which they are hiding, and they don't want to tell you because then the valuation of their company is going to go down. Another thing they would do is, this is in the context of lying, is they will say that they are serious about doing a deal, but they're actually not serious. They just want to know what's the price of their company. Suppose you're sitting and somebody walks in and says that I want to buy your house. You're not going to say no immediately. You want to know how much you're getting. Maybe you're getting a crazy price and the person really wants your house for whatever reason, and you can squeeze that person and then buy a house somewhere else. This thing happens. Some people don't have any intention to sell, but if you have a crazy offer, you're offering some obscene amount of money, then they feel like, okay, then I would sell. If this person is stupid enough to give me this price, then I would sell. Well, that's not a serious seller. And they would give you an impression that they're interested, and they will lead you on for months. They will even send you the information, and then they will not take the decision last moment. And there are some ways to find signs, but that's one problem that you will deal with. You will even deal with this with the banks. They will tell you a lot of the times they're interested in doing a deal, and they will get you invested. They will even get you to spend money on due diligence, and then later on they will say, oh, actually we lost confidence on the deal. These are the reasons. Now you need to sign personal guarantee, and you're locked in. So lying is a big problem in the corporate world, and they'll always frame it as if the facts have changed. Like, oh, before it was like this, now it's like this. We weren't lying to you. And it's a classic move that a lot of people do, and it's going to get extremely frustrating. So I would actually anticipate, and I would even assume this person is lying, and I'll have to investigate. So you are really walking into a mirage, a maze, an illusion, where people's faces are not their true faces. The information that they're giving you is not fully accurate. You have to have that factored in. Even the financial statements that's audited is not going to be 100%. And if you don't believe me, read that book, Financial Intelligence, and you will see that just because a number on the paper says $10 million doesn't actually mean the company has that in cash. They might have only collected $5 million. But on the paper, it will show 10 million. And that's, you got to be careful with lying. It's a big issue. Number 4 is bureaucracy. Okay. This is typically I've seen in banks. The real decision makers may be in the shadows. You may not see them. They may be members of credit committee, and they have these sales guys who are the front of the bank, who are trained to deal with the clients and get as much information out as possible. And they're not decision makers, and they will sometimes pretend to be decision makers for you to engage with them, because they understand that people don't want to deal with someone who's not a decision maker. So if it's a person who's not a decision maker and is just there to get information, they would not lead you to believe that they are not the decision makers. Some of them will be transparent and tell you, but things, when there are multiple layers and multiple people involved, there is going to be a Chinese whisper element where you will say something to them and then they will say something to the other person based on what they have understood. And if you really understand that this is not the decision maker and there is no way to get in touch with the decision maker except for going through them, then you have to make sure that the way you present the information is structured in a manner that's not too complicated for many people to understand. You have to structure information in a manner that a third grade student or a student that's in his fifth grade can understand what you've written down. Except for some of the technicalities, obviously, but you want to structure information in a simple format. You have to account for the fact that there might be a Chinese whisper. You may say something, they may understand something, and then they may communicate something else. The other thing about bureaucracy that you need to understand is that the person that you're talking to may not actually understand what you are saying. I faced this with some of the banks, that they did not understand how acquisition financing worked. They had given capital to companies to grow and expand their business. They had given capital for a real estate deal, but they hadn't given capital for acquisition. So they did not have the expertise to be able to understand what I was saying, and they were just pretending on the call that they do understand, but they actually didn't. Even a lot of the senior bankers did not have experience in doing acquisition financing. That was managed by a very premium section of the bank. There were a few individuals who maybe worked at Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan that understood acquisition financing, and they dealt with completely different ticket sizes. So I was dealing with someone who does not understand acquisition financing, while I was assuming that they understand acquisition financing. So I was using verbiage and language related to M&A, but these guys didn't understand what that is. These guys were just sales guys trying to get information, and that was a big problem because there was a gap in expertise. So I had to structure the language in a way that is simple enough for him to understand, and if he cannot understand it, at least the person above him can understand it. So these are the challenges of bureaucracy that you would face in the corporate world. The same thing could happen when you're going to buy a company. If it's a very big company, like I negotiated with several $2 billion companies, and the owner did not show up at the meeting. He had a right-hand man who he had delegated, maybe a CEO level guy who was talking to us, and the owner would come at a later stage. So that person may not really understand the motivations of why the top guy wants to sell his company. Only the top guy knows in his head why he's really selling it. He may give some financial reasons to the guy. He may have revealed his position, he may have not, but there are emotional and psychological reasons, or something in his personal life has changed due to which he's selling the company. You will never know why he's selling, but there is a layer that he has added, and that person doesn't understand why the person wants to sell, and that actually the person is desperate. So the person that is being delegated this task may really negotiate hard, and when in fact you could pass off with a much lower offer. if you had dealt with the decision maker directly, because that's the guy who has the pain point. The CEO is just an employee. He has nothing to gain from the deal, nothing to lose. So when there are these mediators, it gets a bit challenging, because you're not going to hit any of the pain points with this guy. This guy is not going to be emotional about the deal. He'll be fresh as a pie, and he would just start negotiating hard and like viciously, without understanding what effect that has on the actual decision maker, in his life. So he's actually not affected emotionally from the deal. He's not even part of the deal. So bureaucracy can be a big challenge for you to navigate. Things are not as straightforward in the corporate world, and that's a bit of a challenge when you're dealing with your friend circle. You don't go through gatekeepers or assistants or CEOs. I mean, you just directly ask the person, do you want to go to this place or not go to this place? It's pretty straightforward. But when you're dealing with these people, there are multiple guards and gatekeepers involved, and that can be very draining, time consuming, and you can also waste a lot of time. Another thing is that you can't read what's going on, because the actual person that you should read is not even in front of you. So those can be some challenges. I always like to get the decision makers involved as soon as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting time. So bureaucracy, big problem. Another one, fifth one, is a little bit linked, but it's gatekeepers. Just to get to the decision maker, you have to go through several gatekeepers. You may have to go through their assistant, and it's a challenge. I expanded on this on the previous point, which is bureaucracy, but there are gatekeepers also. Both these points are a little bit linked. Number 6 is getting agreement through multiple parties. Okay, this is different than getting, the first or second point that I made about multiple parties, multiple decision makers. This is actually multiple parties. For example, you have a bank, and you have a seller, and you have the board, right? So to do a deal, you need to go through the banker who's gathering information, who's going to present it to the credit committee. The credit committee has to approve and say yes. The seller also has to say yes, and the board has to say yes and feel comfortable with the deal. So you're dealing with getting agreement from 3 different parties. So again, it's not about getting agreement from one person. There are many parties involved, and all of them have to come together, and all of them have to agree to this thing that you're proposing. And it's not always, if one of those things fail, then the whole deal would crater. So you would have to have, in a very timely manner, each of these aspects like agreed upon and decided, and you want all the decision makers lining up, and there is a window of opportunity where this happens, where you got to close, and any disruption can take place in any of these 3 places. So you have to be careful about these multi-party dynamic, and that's where your leadership skills is going to come in play, because you're really dependent on other people. Your future depends on their agreement, not just one person's agreement. Multiple people have to say yes to what you want. So that is a challenge, but that wasn't my weak point. Leadership is not my weak point. So I did not struggle with that. My main thing was the lying part was extremely challenging for me to navigate, because I just didn't want to believe that people lie. Next is middlemen and advisors poisoning the ear. You may have gotten in touch with the decision maker. Let's say there is a business you want to buy, doing a couple of $1 million. Well, it's only one shareholder. Let's take a hypothetical scenario. It's one shareholder. He owns a company, $1 million. Typically, there's going to be one shareholder when it's $1 million company. So you may think that you're talking to the only decision maker, but you've got the wife, you've got the kids. Sometimes the person even has parents, so you have actually a few people who are influencing the deal. And in some cases, they may have an advisor that you don't see. So sometimes you will see an advisor, like a broker, that they will get you in touch with, but sometimes you don't see the advisor. So they are being advised by somebody, even a brother-in-law who's an accountant, the wife, she may be an accountant, the child, he may be grown-up adult who may have his own opinion and own bias why he should or should not do the deal, or why he should or shouldn't say yes to the deal. I had one transaction where it was a cosmetic clinic doing a couple of $1 million in revenue, and the guy invited me to his house, and I went to his house, and he said, and we had been discussing the deal for a couple of weeks and months, and he said, Prithvi, meet my son, he's going to Harvard in the US. And I was like, that's great, good to meet you, and we had a nice conversation. And after some time, so I was like, this is slam dunk, because the kid is going to USA and he wants to settle in USA. So he's not going to be his successor. And he has this business, and this guy is 60 years old. I could buy this company. I could be his successor. But in a couple of months' time, the guy did not get into Harvard, and he started to think about taking over his father's empire. And he started to influence his father as to how he shouldn't do the deal. And I proposed a deal structure that was very favorable to him, and he said yes at the meeting. But then he went back home, and the son came into the picture, and his whole demeanor towards me changed. So that's a classic example of middlemen and advisors poisoning the ear. This person also had an investment banker that I did not meet, who was advising him on everything that I was proposing on. And there's always this second party dynamic. It's kind of like you like a girl and her friend doesn't like you, or her friend, it's not in her friend's interest for you guys to get together. And because of that reason, the friend keeps poisoning her ear, keeps extracting information out of you and keep poisoning her ear, and ultimately kills the deal. We've all experienced that. So there is a third party dynamic that comes into play that you have to be very careful of, and you have to make sure that those people, their needs are met, and you have to deal with them properly also. You can't just discount them. And thankfully later on, he started to bring his son, so we could have some kind of an understanding of what he expects and wants. And then you've got number 8 is changing variables. Just because they wanted to do a deal in December, they may change their mind. In July, they may change their mind. So by the time you have an agreement with them on the terms of buying their company, by the time you get to financing, they may change their mind. And that's a crazy thing. Or you spoke to a bank in January, but you're actually going to them for financing in December, and they have changed their policies. Banking is not a static thing, it's dynamic. Their policies are changing. The sectors that they lend in changes. The criteria on which they lend also changes. So their positions are changing, and even people within the bank, the decision makers, they're constantly changing them. They're removing them from the position and they're changing them. Why? Because a lot of these people can be bribed. There are, and it's illegal to do that. So, a lot of the banking professionals, if they are the decision makers, there have been cases, illegal cases, where these individuals were bribed. So as an internal policy, they keep changing the decision makers within the bank. Not in every bank, not in every country. Somebody told me this about the region that I was in, that there were some bad cases that happened, and after that, that particular bank started to change people in decision-making positions. And some banks may do it, some banks may not do it, some regions may do it, some regions may not do it. Take this piece of advice with a grain of salt, but you do have a changing variables. Their policies do change, whether the decision maker changes or not. And a lot of the times the decision maker do change. So you have changing variables. The seller that you talked to, he wanted to do the deal. Now he doesn't want to do the deal. He may have agreed to an offer, but in 6 months' time, while you were looking for the financing, he got another offer. It may not be a legitimate offer, but someone just walked into his clinic and offered slightly more money than you. And the owner is starting to feel that you're ripping him off or you're taking advantage of his situation when this noble guy is giving more money than you. Okay, so things can change because there are changing variables. Nothing is static. It's the same thing that you want to date a girl and you mustering courage for 6 months, and she was single for 6 months, and just when you're about to approach, she met someone, and then it's gone. So that's the changing variables. Things are moving constantly. So time is of essence. I had one business partner, a great guy, a corporate finance guy, and he would always say, Prithvi, time is of essence. Prithvi, time is of essence. We need to move quickly. Prithvi, time is of essence. And he kept saying that, and he drilled it into my head. Time is of essence, right? So you got to take action fast at times. You got to move in fast, and you have to understand that there are these multiple factors at play here, multiple variables. And then finally, you have number 9, protecting your position. Mergers and acquisitions is a field where there is a lot of money involved. There is a huge amount of money involved. Companies, you're buying a whole ecosystem. When you go to buy a company, it's $1 million ecosystem if it's $1 million company. So you're buying several companies and there is a lot of money involved. And whenever there is a lot of money and resources involved, there is greed involved, there is jealousy involved. I mean, you're talking about a significant amount of money. The amount of money that can set somebody for life. The amount of money that somebody has not seen in their entire life. An amount of money that can completely change a person's family situation, their children's situation, their children's future, everything in their life can change. And money tend to have an upward spiral movement. So if they get access to this money, it's going to have an upward spiral effect where subsequently they might use that money to create more and more success. So it's not just about the money that's on the table, it's how much that money can produce for them in the future, because that money would just put them in a powerful position. So when you have something that's so life-changing, when you have that much money on the table, it's easy to have morality go out of the window for people. They may ignore the relationship that they had with you. They may ignore who you are as a person. They may even not look at you as a human being. They may just look at you like an obstacle, somebody who's in the way of their dreams, and they may come after you. So there are a lot of people who can do that around you. So you have to make sure that you protect your position, and that's challenge number 9, is protecting your position. You have to protect your position, and you're all the time looking over your shoulder. I remember watching one of Donald Trump's interview where he says that I have to all the time look over my shoulder for who's after me, who wants the position that I'm in. And you will always have that. People are just watching you when you're in a position of power. When you're not in a position of power, when you don't have access to a lot of resources, then people kind of leave you alone. But the moment you are around a treasure, then there is going to be sharks around, there's going to be alligators around, there's going to be trouble. You always see this in sci-fi movies or in fantasy movies, that whenever they get access to something that's powerful, something that has treasure, there's typically going to be a dragon protecting it, or a snake, or something that you have to fight, right? Same thing happens with power. There is a lot of demon around power. A lot of strong emotions of jealousy and greed. And you may think that somebody has been your friend, but that was only the case when there was not any significant resources involved. The moment you have significant resources involved, you can't really trust anybody. So that's challenge number 9, is protecting your position. And protecting your position can get very lonely, because you can't even trust your girlfriend, to be honest with you, or your boyfriend, if you're a girl listening to this, but you can't really even trust them because suddenly, they see, oh, this guy is going to make so much money. How much am I getting? How is my life going to change because of that? So there is always this angle people are thinking about, and the moment you start getting access to resources, you become a target. So protecting your position can be a very challenging thing, and that can put you in a state where you don't trust anybody. If you really understand this, that your position is at threat from anybody and everybody, you can't really trust anybody. And it's tough to have relationships which is purely love-based, because you can't really trust anybody. Because if you trust them because of love, you may reveal something that can put your position on risk. And can you really trust somebody with that kind of power, that kind of information? An information that could take you down or take away the power. You can't really trust anybody with that information, because the moment they have that information, they have leverage on you. So there are very complex dynamics around protecting your position. It can come from many different directions. I have faced some of it. I was able to tackle with it, but my position did get shaken up at some point, and then I had to get it back together. So those are the top 9 challenges while buying a business. And if you're interested in playing this game, if you're interested in positioning yourself to create wealth, if you want to get into the game of buying businesses, I've got a mentorship program. I consult and mentor individuals on a one-on-one and a group basis. I have several mentees now from different parts of the world. I've got 2 of the mentees who are executing, who have already built their boards, brought some very high profile individuals on their team. They're in their early 20s, these guys, clients of mine, and they've got together, high profile experienced guys in their 50s and 60s who have done billions of dollars in deals. And I mentored them, over 2 or 3 sessions. They were able to do this, and they have still a significant portion of their mentorship to go through, and they're going out and they're getting results. So if you are someone who is interested in getting involved in this, email me and we will take it from there. I'll talk to you soon.